The fluorescent lights hummed on the 78th floor. Ethan Brooks pushed his cleaning cart past empty conference rooms, invisible as always. 3 years of night shifts at Hale Group headquarters had taught him to disappear into the background. Chicago's winter pressed against the windows. Snow fell in thick curtains. Ethan had finished the south wing early, the storm was worsening, and he wanted to get home to his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. That's when he saw her. Victoria Hale lay crumpled beside the executive elevators, one shoe off. Black dress damp with melted snow. The CEO of Hale Group, daughter of Richard Hale himself, was shaking on the marble floor. Ethan's first instinct was to back away. Getting involved meant getting noticed. Questions. Risk. But Victoria made a small sound and tried to rise. Her arms gave out. He thought of Lily, of teaching her to help people who'd fallen. Even if you're scared, he'd said. Ethan walked over. Victoria's eyes were unfocused. I need to. Let me help you up. He crouched down carefully. She couldn't stand. Fever burned through her suit jacket. When he suggested calling security, panic flashed across her face. No. She grabbed his arm. No security. My father. He can't. Her grip loosened. Snow fell harder outside. The temperature was dropping to dangerous levels. Ethan had 2 choices: call for help and disappear, or make a decision that couldn't be undone. He made his choice. I'm going to get you out of here. Stay awake if you can. Victoria barely nodded. Ethan understood the system. Security rounds every 40 minutes, cameras with blind spots. If he called for help, Victoria Hale, collapsing in her own building, would become a scandal, and she'd specifically said her father couldn't know. He wrapped his jacket around her shivering form and helped her stand on the 3rd attempt. They made it to the service elevator, using his employee card. As they descended 78, 77, 76, Ethan's heart hammered. What was he doing? Taking an unconscious billionaire from her own building without telling anyone? But he remembered that desperate no when he'd suggested calling security. Sometimes you had to trust that people knew their own situations. The garage was empty. Ethan settled Victoria in his 15-year-old sedan and cranked the heat to maximum. He cleared the snow from his windshield with numb fingers. At the garage exit, he paused. Once through that gate, there was no turning back. Victoria stirred. Ethan drove into the storm. The highway was nearly empty. Ethan kept his speed at 35, watching for lane markers through the accumulating snow. Victoria drifted in and out of consciousness. Where? Meeting. The board. The only thing you need right now is rest. She fell silent, her head against the window. Ethan thought about Lily asleep at home, about Mrs. Chen watching her. He'd texted saying he'd be back by 4 a.m. Now he was driving through a blizzard with Victoria Hale unconscious beside him. The Aurora exit appeared through the snow. Ethan took it carefully, tires slipping on ice beneath fresh powder. The suburban roads were worse, but they also meant home. He turned onto Maple Street. His house, modest blue siding, snow-buried porch, the 4th one down, sat quiet in the storm. Victoria's eyes opened, clearer than before. She looked at the house, the neighborhood. Yes, you need somewhere safe. This is the safest place I know. Something flickered across her face before her eyes closed again. Mrs. Chen opened the door before they reached it, taking in the situation with the calm of someone who'd weathered harder storms than this. Together, they brought Victoria inside, into the small house where ordinary life happened. Ethan settled Victoria on the sofa, the same one he'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. Mrs. Chen brought blankets from the linen closet, the heavy ones kept for the coldest nights. They piled them over Victoria's shivering form. "Should I call a doctor?" Mrs. Chen whispered. "Not yet." She was, She specifically said no to that. I think she needs a few hours of rest first. If she's not better by morning, I'll insist. Mrs. Chen studied him with the piercing look of someone who'd seen too much of life to be easily fooled. You know who this is, and you know what kind of trouble this could bring. She nodded slowly. Your wife would have done the same thing. She never could walk past someone who needed help. A pause. Lily's still asleep. She doesn't know anything's different. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd manage. You always do. She patted his arm. I'll be next door if you need me. But Ethan? Be careful. Rich people's problems have a way of becoming everyone else's problems. After she left, Ethan sat in the old armchair across from the sofa and watched Victoria sleep. The living room was small and cluttered with the evidence of single parenthood. Lily's toys in a basket by the TV, library books stacked on the coffee table, a half-finished puzzle on the floor. The old furnace rumbled to life in the basement, pushing warm air through the vents. Outside, the wind howled and threw snow against the windows. But inside, the house was warm and quiet and safe. Ethan didn't sleep. He kept watch through the long hours before dawn, checking Victoria's breathing, adjusting the blankets when she kicked them off, placing a cool washcloth on her forehead when the fever spiked again around 4 a.m. This was madness. He knew that. He was a night janitor with a 6th-grade education, living paycheck to paycheck, raising a daughter alone. Victoria Hale existed in a different universe, one with board meetings and international deals and private elevators. Their paths should never have crossed, let alone intersected like this. But somewhere around 5 a.m., as the storm began to ease and the first gray light of dawn crept across the snow-covered yard, Ethan realized something. For all her power and wealth, Victoria had been utterly alone on that hallway floor. No assistant, no security detail, no friends rushing to her aid, just expensive shoes and a designer suit and a fever that didn't care about her net worth. Alone. Like he'd been alone when his wife died, when the hospital bills piled up, when he'd had to figure out how to be both mother and father to a grieving child. Maybe that's why he'd helped her. Not because of who she was, but because of what she was in that moment, another human being who needed help and had no one else to turn to. Around 6 a.m., Ethan heard small footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her pajamas covered in cartoon stars. Daddy? You're home early. Had to come back because of the snow, sweetheart. Come here. Lily padded over and climbed into his lap. She was getting too big for this, but Ethan held her anyway, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Who's that? Lily whispered, looking at Victoria on the sofa. Someone who needed help. She's going to rest here for a little while. Like when you helped Mr. Patterson when he fell on the ice? Exactly like that. Lily seemed satisfied with this explanation. She snuggled against Ethan's chest, and they sat together in the quiet morning, watching the snow fall. Victoria opened her eyes to unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? This wasn't her penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. This was a small living room with worn carpet and hand-me-down furniture and framed crayon drawings on the walls. Then, memory returned in fragments. The elevator, the hallway, the janitor with kind eyes and careful hands, the cold drive through the storm. She sat up slowly. Her head still ached, but the disorienting fever fog had lifted. She was wearing her dress from yesterday, now wrinkled and stained with melted snow. Someone had removed her shoes and covered her with several heavy blankets. The smell of cooking reached her. Coffee, pancakes, butter melting in a hot pan. Victoria stood on unsteady legs and followed the scent to the kitchen. It was tiny, barely bigger than her walk-in closet at home, but it was warm and bright, with morning light streaming through a window over the sink. Ethan stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. A small girl sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and coloring in a book with intense concentration. "You're awake," Ethan said, turning. His voice was gentle, without judgment. "How do you feel?" Better, much better. Victoria's voice came out rough. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. You needed help. I helped. That's all there is to it. He gestured to the table. Please, sit. You should eat something. The girl looked up from her coloring book. Are you feeling better? Daddy said you were sick. Yes, I'm feeling better. Thank you. I'm Lily. I'm 6. I can read now. Do you like pancakes? Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. I do like pancakes. Good, because Daddy makes the best ones. He puts vanilla in them. That's the secret. Ethan plated pancakes and set them in front of Victoria along with a mug of coffee. It's not fancy, but it's hot. Victoria took a bite. The pancake was fluffy and warm, made with care. The coffee was strong and exactly what she needed. For the first time in months, maybe years, she was eating food that someone had made simply to nourish, without Instagram photos or business discussions or networking opportunities attached. This is perfect, she said quietly. They ate together in the small kitchen while snow continued to fall outside. Lily chattered about her school, about the snow fort she wanted to build, about a book her teacher had read that week. Ethan listened with the attention of a parent who genuinely cared about every word. Victoria watched them, father and daughter, and felt something crack open inside her chest. When had she last sat at a breakfast table like this? When had she last had a conversation that wasn't about quarterly earnings or market positioning or strategic acquisitions? I should go, Victoria said finally. I've imposed enough. I need to call my driver, get back to the city. Roads won't be clear for a few more hours, Ethan said. And you still need rest, but if you want to go, I'll drive you. You've already done too much. I did what anyone should do, but they both knew that wasn't true. Most people wouldn't have risked it. Most people would have made the safe choice, the choice that protected their own interests. Ethan had chosen differently. An hour later, Victoria sat in the passenger seat of his old sedan as he drove her back toward the city. The snow had stopped. The roads were being cleared. The world was returning to normal, except nothing felt normal anymore. When Ethan pulled up to her building, Victoria turned to him. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. At least let me know. His voice was firm but kind. This doesn't work if you try to make it transactional. You needed help. I helped. That's all this is. Victoria got out of the car. She stood on the cleared sidewalk, watching as Ethan drove away, his old sedan disappearing into the morning traffic. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. 3 days passed. Victoria returned to her routine early morning meetings, afternoon calls with international partners, evening reviews of quarterly projections. She told her assistant she'd been working from home due to the storm. No one questioned it. But every night, as she looked out from her penthouse at the city lights, she thought about the small house in Aurora, about Lily swinging her legs at the breakfast table, singing to herself between bites of pancake, about Ethan's steady kindness that expected nothing in return, that existed outside the transactional world she'd always known, about what it felt like to be treated as a person rather than as a hail. On the 3rd day, she found herself driving back to that neighborhood. She told herself she just wanted to thank him properly, to make sure he understood she appreciated what he'd done, to perhaps invite him and Lily to dinner somewhere nice. The truth was more complicated than that. The truth was that she couldn't stop thinking about the warmth of that small kitchen, the genuineness of the conversation, the feeling of being seen for who she was rather than what she represented. She knocked on his door at 7 p.m. Ethan answered, still in his work clothes from the day shift, looking surprised. Victoria, I didn't expect. My father wants to see you, she said. The words came out more blunt than she'd intended. More final. Ethan's expression shifted. Understanding dawned, followed by something that looked like resignation. He knows. Security footage. The parking garage. Someone in IT pulled the logs for that night, trying to figure out why there was an anomaly in my access records. My father asked questions. He always asks questions. She met his eyes. I told him the truth, all of it, and he wants to see me, tomorrow, 7 p.m. At the estate. Victoria's hands tightened around her car keys. Ethan, I'm sorry. I tried to keep this private, tried to explain that it was just a kindness with no strings attached. But he's determined to understand what happened. Does he think I did something wrong? He thinks he doesn't know you. And my father doesn't like unknowns in my life. He doesn't trust situations he can't control or people whose motivations he can't understand. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Behind him, Victoria could hear the TV playing some children's show Lily must be watching. The sounds of normal life. The life he'd built carefully, quietly, deliberately, away from people like her and her father. What happens if I say no? He asked. Then he'll make assumptions. And my father's assumptions are rarely favorable to anyone but himself. He'll decide you're hiding something, or that you're trying to leverage the situation, or that you're a threat. And then, she trailed off, and then my life gets very difficult. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. What do you want me to do? The question surprised her. It had been years since anyone had asked her what she wanted. People asked what the board wanted, what the shareholders expected, what her father thought was best, but not what she wanted. I want you to meet him, Victoria said slowly, carefully. I want you to tell him exactly what happened, the same way you told me. I want him to see what I saw that morning, someone who helped without agenda, without expectation of reward. Maybe that's naive. Maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I'm putting you in an impossible position. But you want your father to see that not everyone operates transactionally. Yes, exactly that. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll come. But Victoria, you should know I'm not good at playing games with people like your father. I'm not going to tell him what I think he wants to hear. I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm not going to apologize for helping you. I wouldn't want you to do anything else. That's why I want you to meet him. As she drove away from the small house in Aurora, Victoria wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Her father was brilliant and ruthless and protective to a fault. He'd built an empire by understanding power dynamics, by knowing how to leverage every situation to his advantage, by never trusting anyone completely. And she'd just invited Ethan Brooks, a man who operated outside those rules entirely, who didn't understand leverage or strategy or calculated advantage directly into her father's line of sight. She gripped the steering wheel tighter and drove through the dark streets, not sure if she was protecting Ethan or endangering him. The Hale estate sat on 20 acres in a suburb 40 minutes north of Chicago. High iron gates. A circular driveway that could accommodate a dozen cars. The main house was built in the Georgian-style red brick. White columns. Symmetrical windows glowing warmly against the snow-covered grounds. Ethan drove through those gates at 6:55 p.m., feeling profoundly out of place. He'd dropped Lily at Mrs. Chen's with instructions to call every hour. He'd changed into his only suit, the one from his wife's funeral, and hoped it was appropriate. A man in a dark suit opened the front door before Ethan could knock. Mr. Brooks, Mr. Hale is expecting you. Follow me, please. The interior matched its exterior grandeur. Hardwood floors that gleamed. Original oil paintings in gilded frames. A staircase that curved upward with craftsmanship that no longer existed in modern construction. They passed several rooms, a library with leather-bound volumes, a sitting room with antique furniture, a dining room with a table that could seat 20 before reaching what appeared to be a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls. A fireplace crackled with real logs. And behind a massive mahogany desk sat Richard Hale. He was in his 70s but looked younger. Sharp eyes that missed nothing. Silver hair precisely cut. the kind of man who'd spent his entire life making decisions that affected thousands of people's livelihoods, who'd built an empire from a single manufacturing plant and never looked back. "Mr. Brooks, please, sit." Richard gestured to a leather chair facing the desk. Ethan sat. He kept his back straight, his hands still. He'd learned long ago that nervousness could be interpreted as guilt. "Thank you for coming," Richard said. His voice was measured, revealing nothing. "I wanted to meet the man who brought my daughter home during the storm. I did what anyone should have done, but most people wouldn't have. Most people would have called security, filed a report, protected themselves from liability. You chose differently." "Why?" "She needed help. The weather was dangerous. It was the right thing to do." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with the intensity of a man trained to detect lies, to find inconsistencies, to identify hidden motives. "Tell me what happened. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." So Ethan did. He explained finding Victoria on the hallway floor, her disorientation, her fever. He described her fear when he suggested calling for help. Her specific mention of her father. He talked about the drive through the storm, the small house in Aurora, Mrs. Chen's help without questions, the breakfast the next morning, the drive back to the city, Victoria's insistence that he accept no payment. Through it all, Richard's expression never changed. He listened with the focus of someone trained to evaluate testimony, to separate truth from deception, to understand motivations beneath words. When Ethan finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled, snow tapped softly against the windows. Outside, the grounds stretched white and pristine under landscape lighting. "What do you want from this situation?" Richard asked finally. "Nothing. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something, Mr. Brooks. Money, career advancement, access to power, status, connection to my family. What is it for you? I want to continue doing my job and raising my daughter without complications. That's all. You took a billionaire to your home while she was incapacitated. You must understand how that looks to people like me. How vulnerable that situation made her." "I understand how it looks," Ethan said quietly. "I also understand that your daughter was sick and scared and alone on a cold floor during a dangerous storm. In that moment, what it looked like mattered less than what was right." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're either remarkably principled or remarkably naive. Maybe both. Do you know what I could do to you? To your employment? To your daughter's school? To your life?" "Yes." Ethan met Richard's gaze directly. "But that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change that I'd make the same choice again if I found someone who needed help." The silence stretched between them. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the hour. Then Richard did something unexpected. He smiled. It was slight, barely there, but genuine. "My daughter told me you refused money, refused any kind of compensation. She said you treated her like a person, not like a Hale. She is a person. That's all that mattered that night. Most people forget that. They see the name, the wealth, the power. They don't see the person underneath." Richard stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. "I built everything Victoria has now. I thought I was protecting her by surrounding her with layers of security, protocols, careful distance from ordinary life. But on that hallway floor, all my protections failed, and the one person who helped her was someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose." He turned back to Ethan. "That troubles me, Mr. Brooks. Not because you helped, but because it took someone from outside our world to do what all our carefully constructed systems couldn't. Maybe that's something worth thinking about." "Perhaps it is." Richard returned to his desk. "You may go. Thank you for your time." Ethan stood. He'd been dismissed, but as he reached the door, Richard spoke again. "Mr. Brooks, my daughter speaks highly of you. That's rare. Don't make me regret allowing this connection to continue. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But it was a clear message. The ground beneath Ethan's feet was less stable than it had been a week ago. He'd just entered a world where kindness could be interpreted as strategy, and integrity looked like calculation. The changes started small. 2 weeks after meeting Richard Hale, Ethan's rent increased by $300. Market adjustments, the landlord said. Legal, but the timing felt deliberate. Ethan called Victoria. It might be nothing, but I'll look into it. Don't. Not yet. I need to know the scope first. If your father is testing me, I need to understand before asking you to intervene. She was silent. You're right. But I don't like it. Next came the school. The administration requested a meeting about concerns regarding family stability. They asked probing questions about his work schedule, about child care, about supervision. Mrs. Chen attended, furious. Lily is one of the best cared-for children I know. This is harassment. The principal wouldn't say who filed the report. The third incident was most concerning. Ethan's car broke down after his shift. Ethan stood in the cold garage, feeling invisible pressure closing in. Richard Hale wasn't personally sabotaging his car. The man was too sophisticated. But someone in his network understood that broken brake lines and inconvenient repairs could be as effective as direct confrontation. The message was clear. You exist at our sufferance. Ethan called Victoria. It's getting worse. He explained everything. Victoria listened, her breathing changing, anger building. This is my father. He creates pressure, watches responses. If they break, they weren't strong enough. If they hold, he respects them. I'm not interested in earning respect through endurance tests. I'm going to stop this. No. Not yet. If you intervene every time, I'll never be free of this dynamic. I need to show him I can hold my ground without protection. Long pause. You're asking me to watch while my father tries to dismantle your life. I'm asking you to trust I can handle pressure without breaking. They hadn't named what was developing the calls that lasted too long. Victoria's weekend visits to Aurora. Lily asking when Miss Victoria would come again. Okay, Victoria said finally. But if Lily is endangered, I'm ending this regardless of what you want. Agreed. Ethan sat in his dark living room afterward, wondering what he'd gotten into. This wasn't fiction where class differences melted away. This was real life, where power had teeth. But he'd survived his wife's death, grinding poverty, 3 years of night shifts and single parenthood. He'd learned survival wasn't about avoiding pressure, it was about deciding what you wouldn't bend on, and he wouldn't bend on this. Victoria deserved to choose who she spent time with, regardless of her father's opinion. The photo appeared in a business gossip blog 6 weeks after the incident. Victoria and Ethan in a parking lot during light snowfall. Victoria laughing. His hand on her arm, casual, friendly, but the caption suggested otherwise. Hale Group CEO's secret romance. Mystery man identified as building maintenance worker. The story spread quickly. By afternoon, major business sites picked it up. By evening, it was trending. By morning, photographers camped outside Ethan's house. Lily was frightened. Daddy, why are those people taking pictures? They're confused. It'll pass. But it didn't. Journalists dug into Ethan's background, his late wife, financial struggles, night shift job. They framed him as either gold digger or working class hero. Neither was true. Victoria called, voice tense. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They're concerned about company image. My father is furious at the media attention. What do you want to do? Tell the truth. Explain what happened. That won't satisfy them. Man helps woman during storm, they become friends. Where's the drama? So we let them create false narratives? We live our lives and let the narratives collapse from lack of substance. That afternoon, Ethan's supervisor called. We're putting you on administrative leave. Paid. For now. Until this resolves, it's better if you're not in the building. Translation. You're an embarrassment. That evening, Victoria showed up through the back alley to avoid photographers. She looked exhausted, hair escaping its arrangement. I'm ending this. I'm holding a press conference, explaining everything. Making it clear anyone who harasses you or Lily will face legal consequences. That'll add fuel to the fire. I don't care. This is my fault. Ethan made tea, sat across from her. It's not your fault. Neither of us could have predicted this, but I can end it. Step back. Make it clear we're not involved romantically. Is that what you want? To step back? Victoria met his eyes. No. Coming here, talking with you and Lily, being somewhere that doesn't require performance or constant vigilance, I don't want to lose that. Then we don't step back. We hold steady. The board might force me out. Then they do. And you'll figure out what comes next. You're very calm. I'm not calm. I'm furious, scared for Lily, worried about money and jobs and reputation damage. Ethan took her hand. But I'm not letting fear make my decisions. I helped you because it was right. We've become friends because we value what we found. That doesn't change because of cameras and gossip. Victoria's eyes glistened. My father warned me. He said ordinary people don't understand the cost of being associated with us. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe the cost is worth it. Is it? Honestly? Ethan thought about the disruption, Lily's confusion, the uncertain future. Then about Victoria laughing at his table, listening to Lily's projects, being herself without performance. Yes, it is. The next morning, Richard Hale called an emergency board meeting. Media speculated wildly. Victoria forced to resign, strategic pivot to distract from scandal. No one predicted what actually happened. The Hale Group boardroom occupied the entire 79th floor. 16 executives sat around a glass conference table, their faces carefully neutral. Victoria stood at the head of the table, presenting quarterly earnings as if nothing unusual was happening. Richard Hale sat at the opposite end, watching. After Victoria finished her presentation, board member Marcus Whitfield, a man who'd been angling to replace Victoria for years, cleared his throat. Before we move to the next agenda item, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. And what elephant would that be, Marcus? The media attention surrounding your personal life. It's affecting company image. Our stock dropped 2 points yesterday. Major clients are asking questions. Are they asking questions about our business practices or about tabloid gossip? Both are relevant when you're the face of this company. Richard Hale hadn't spoken yet. He simply watched, his expression unreadable. Another board member, Patricia Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, spoke up. Victoria, we're not trying to control your personal life, but when that life becomes a liability to shareholder value, we have a responsibility to address it. What are you proposing? A public statement, distancing yourself from this man. A focus on business. Perhaps a sabbatical to let things cool down. In other words, you want me to publicly humiliate someone who did nothing wrong, pretend that genuine human connection is a mistake, and hide from my own company until you all decide it's safe for me to return. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard Hale finally spoke. Victoria, step outside. I'd like to speak with the board privately. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she nodded and left the room. For 10 minutes, she stood in the corridor outside, staring at the Chicago skyline through the windows. Snow had started falling again, lighter than that night 6 weeks ago, but persistent. She thought about Ethan in his small house in Aurora, about Lily asking when Victoria could come over for dinner again, about the life she'd glimpsed beyond the glass towers and board meetings, a life built on things that mattered more than quarterly earnings. The boardroom door opened. Richard emerged alone. "Walk with me," he said. They went to his office on the same floor, smaller than Victoria's, but filled with decades of memories. Photos of groundbreakings, of factories opening, of handshakes with presidents and prime ministers. Richard stood at the window, looking out at the falling snow. When your mother died, everyone told me to sell the company, told me I couldn't run it and raise you properly, told me I'd have to choose. Victoria waited. Her father rarely spoke about her mother. I chose you, Richard continued. I thought that meant building something you could inherit, creating a legacy that would protect you from ever being vulnerable. But on that hallway floor 6 weeks ago, all my protections failed. And the person who helped you was someone with no stake in our world, no agenda, no angle to play. Father, let me finish. He turned to face her. I've spent the past 6 weeks testing Ethan Brooks, applying pressure, watching how he responds. And do you know what I found? That he's stronger than you expected? That he doesn't think in terms of advantage. When I increased his rent, he adjusted his budget. When I had the school investigate, he defended his parenting calmly and thoroughly. When someone sabotaged his car, yes, I know about that. And no, I didn't order it. But one of my overzealous executives thought they were doing me a favor. He had it repaired and moved on. What's your point? My point is that every pressure I applied, he absorbed without complaint and without trying to leverage his connection to you for relief. He didn't threaten exposure, didn't demand intervention. He simply held his ground and continued living his life with integrity. Richard walked to his desk and picked up a folder. This is the background check I ordered on him. 3 years of exemplary work performance. Respected by neighbors. Excellent parent. Not a single red flag in his entire life except that he's poor, and that's not a character flaw, it's a circumstance. He handed the folder to Victoria. I thought I could find something to disqualify him. I thought I could prove he was a threat to you, to the company, to everything we've built. But I can't, because he's not. Victoria stared at her father. What are you saying? I'm saying that Ethan Brooks is exactly what he appears to be, a good man who helped my daughter without expecting anything in return. And I'm saying that I was wrong to test him, wrong to apply pressure, and wrong to assume that everyone who enters our world must have an ulterior motive. You're apologizing? Don't look so shocked. I make mistakes rarely, but I do make them. Richard's expression softened slightly. I went back into that boardroom and told them that any board member who cannot see the difference between a personal life and a business liability is free to resign. I told them that my daughter has my full support in all aspects of her life. And I told them that anyone who speaks disrespectfully about Ethan Brooks or his child will answer to me personally. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Why? Because on that hallway floor, you trusted a stranger more than you trusted me. Because when you needed help, you specifically said I couldn't know. Because I've built walls so high around you that you chose to collapse in a public corridor rather than call your own father. His voice roughened. And because when I see you with Ethan and his daughter, I see someone I haven't seen in years, my daughter, genuinely happy. Victoria crossed the office and hugged her father. He stood stiffly for a moment, then returned the embrace. The board approved the quarterly strategy, Richard said quietly, and I told them that effective immediately, I'm creating a new company initiative focused on supporting the working-class employees who keep our buildings running. Better wages, benefits, housing assistance. I'm putting Ethan on the advisory board, paid position, of course. He won't take it. He'll see it as charity. Then you'll have to convince him it's not charity, it's earned. Because that night, he saved my daughter, and that's worth more than any quarterly earnings report. 3 months later, snow had melted. Crocuses pushed through soil in Ethan's yard. The photographers had moved on. The media narrative had faded. Ethan still worked at Hale Group, now in facilities management with better hours and pay. He joined Richard's employee advocacy initiative, lending his perspective to shape policies that actually helped people. Victoria's position was stronger than ever. Quarterly earnings exceeded expectations. The board had backed down. She'd learned strength sometimes meant vulnerability. On a Saturday in early April, Ethan and Lily planted flowers Victoria had helped choose. Victoria sat on the porch steps, shoes kicked off, watching them work. "Miss Victoria, will the tulips be red or pink?" Lily asked. The package said red, but gardens are good at surprises. Mrs. Chen brought lemonade. "You're all going to get sunburned." "Kitchen." "I'll get it." As Ethan went inside, Mrs. Chen sat beside Victoria. "When he brought you here that night, I thought it would be trouble. You were right to worry, but wrong about the outcome. You're good for them. You make them happy. They make me happy too. Then don't let anything take that away. Rich, poor, none of that matters as much as people think." Ethan stood in his kitchen, looking out at his daughter laughing in the dirt, at Victoria comfortable on his porch steps in her expensive suit. His phone buzzed. "Richard Hale. Family dinner next Sunday. Bring Lily." Victoria says no excuses. Family dinner. 6 months ago, the idea would have been absurd. Now, it felt natural. He grabbed the sunscreen and headed outside. Victoria looked up, shielding her eyes, and smiled. The same smile from the parking lot photo, but now it meant something simple and true. The world would keep turning. Challenges would come. But Ethan had learned. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe choice. Sometimes it was simply the human choice to help, to connect, to trust that decency mattered most. And sometimes, if you were lucky, that choice led somewhere unexpected, somewhere that felt like home, even in the middle of a winter storm. The tulips would bloom in weeks. They'd planted enough for the entire front walk, a collaboration between a single father, a billionaire CEO, and a 6-year-old who believed gardens could grow anything if you watered them enough. Maybe she was right.